I now call the special council meeting to order for Friday, December 13th, 2024. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda of the special council meeting of Friday, December 13th, 2024? Councillor Stetsky, Councillor Ray. All favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, this is our third meeting for our 2025 to 2029 5-year financial plan. Before we get into the bulk of the budget meeting, we have a few bylaws that are backed up a little bit here that we're going to take care of this afternoon. First bylaw for adoption is from Finance regarding monthly pre-authorized tax payment plan repeal bylaw number 4175 2024. Can I get a motion that council adopt monthly pre-authorized tax payment plan repeal bylaw number 4175 2024? Mover, please. Councillor Ray, Councillor Blissett. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you so much. Next bylaw this afternoon is also from Finance regarding solid waste and recycling collection and disposal amendment bylaw number 4176 2024. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Popoff, Councillor Graham. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Next bylaw is from Engineering and Development Services regarding business license amendment bylaw number 4177 2024. Can I get a motion that council adopt business license amendment bylaw number 4177 2024? Mover, please. Councillor Blissett, Councillor Stetsky. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And the final bylaw this afternoon is from Finance regarding utility rate penalty deferral bylaw number 4178 2024. Can I get a motion that council adopt utility rate penalty deferral bylaw number 4178 2024? Mover, please. Councillor Stetsky, Councillor Blissett. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously as well. Okay. We're moving into the new business, and the bulk of today's new business is the budget meeting. Before I turn it over to Charlotte, I just want to remind everybody that we're partway through the process. We've got a lot of work to do. There's going to be numbers thrown around. Certainly the public watching, don't overreact to the numbers and the conversations. We have a long way to go till we get to the end. So I'd appreciate that everybody kind of take it for what it is. There's a lot of work to try and get this down to a palatable budget for the public. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to Charlotte. Charlotte.
Thank you, Mayor Price. Welcome, members of council, people online, and staff. So the first item on the agenda is to review the tax levy increase. So we have handed out a schedule for council outlining what makes up the 8.87% increase that we discussed on Wednesday. So I'm going to go through the items, and please feel free to ask questions as I walk through the information. So the road dedicated tax, of course, is 1%, contributes 1%. The policing contract increase of $696,000 plus the amount that is no longer funded by the RCMP surplus of $261,000. The total increase there is 2.68%.
Councillor Blissett has a question.
Thank you. So do you know what the surplus is yet from this year's RCMP budget?
The surplus, I think, is 268 or 95. Pardon me for not having the exact number.
So that's all. So where does that fit in here?
When we discussed it on Wednesday, I outlined the fact. When we discussed it on Wednesday, I outlined the fact that much of that surplus was going to be needed to cover the additional retro pay that had resulted from the settlement of the most recent collective agreement.
So you're saying, Eva, that how many officers did we fully fund last year?
26.
26. And we had 26 attending, so our 25 attending, so we only have $200,000 surplus?
I believe the utilization for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024 was somewhere around 21,000, or 21 members, pardon me, 21 point something, maybe
Okay.
22.
And so you're saying, so 21 members versus 26, but I'm understanding that some of that money was eaten up in overtime and things like that.
Some of it was eaten up in overtime, yes. And there were also, as we also talked about Wednesday, there were these additional unbudgeted amounts for vacation accrued payouts. So under the new collective agreement, which was the very first collective agreement 2 sessions ago, the agreement was that they could not carry forward there was a cap on how much vacation they could carry forward. So we had to pay that out,
Okay,
the excess, and and there was also a signing bonus.
okay. So the $200,000 surplus, is that accounted for in this, like, when it says surplus no longer funded, that's 0.79, that's 261,000. That's
Yes.
the surplus.
Yes, so if per the schedule that was presented on Wednesday,
Yeah.
in 2024, we funded $465,000 from surplus, and in 2025, we only have $196,000 left over in the RCMP surplus. That does not consider whatever small residual amount may be left over from the $268,000 from March 2024. So the difference between the 465,000 and the 196 in 2025 is the 261,000 that you see on the schedule today.
It's 260, I'm not clear on that math.
261. So 400 and, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact numbers,
Okay.
but 465,000 was funded from surplus in 2024. In 2025, we're only funding $196,000 from surplus. The difference between 465 and 196, give or take change, is $261,000. So that's additional taxes that I need to raise in order to cover the budget, the 2025 budget.
So on the 1.95 increase, it like that's 700,000 basically in policing contract. First of all, I don't see how that is 1.95% either.
1.6.
Because if
695,000 is 1.95% tax increase, considering that the tax,
okay.
$357,000 is 1%.
All right, so, and that's funding how many positions?
26.
Okay, so what did we fund, and that's our
Last-
risk managed level?
No, we haven't, as presented on Wednesday.
I know.
There has been nothing risk managed in 2025. In 2024, there was $200,000 risk managed.
So we have the possibility
Correct.
of risk managing $200,000.
Or whatever number council wants. That's correct.
Okay, so that's something for us to consider.
Correct.
Point. Councilor Graham?
What's the process look like to defund officers? And how do we do that so we can't afford it? Tell them, can't afford it, we're defunding, and we'll run with the 20 that we have.
There is, probably Charlene is going to have to provide the detail, but there is a letter that goes back to the RCMP once a year, I believe it's in May or June, where we confirm the number that we are wanting to fund. So that's one of the steps, but another step would be to send an official letter to the RCMP saying we wish to decrease the number of funded members.
Councilor Ray?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. So the city budget year is the calendar year. The RCMP's year is April to March.
Correct.
Just wanting to clarify that. It's always tricky when there's different
That's correct.
years. It's too bad their year is not the same as ours, but
So, pardon me, Councillor Ray. So the budget numbers that we provide are based on Charlene adjusts for the differences in the year end. So 9/12 in one year and 3/12 and so that calculation is worked in.
thank you very much. In terms of risk managing. I'm just wondering if you could revisit your comments from our previous budget meeting and revisit the question that we had last year. What is your comfort level currently for risk managing a portion of the RCMP contract for 2025?
Thank you, Councillor Wraith, through the mayor. I have expressed no comfort in risk managing. When the question was asked of me last year, the most recent financial statements I had showed a surplus of $341,000. The very next set of financial statements I received showed an increase or a surplus, pardon me, of $39,000. So within a month, it had swung $300,000. At the end of 2020, now we've already talked about the March 2024 surplus. At the end of 2023, their year end, March 31st, we actually had a deficit. So, and also, as I mentioned on Wednesday, the fact that we've added these 4 floater or unfunded positions, while I do believe that they provide flexibility for the detachment, add another level of complexity around budgeting for this particular cost line. Now, what I will say is, while I have no comfort currently, the contract, as all of this sort of gets baked into our budget, I anticipate that going forward, I would be able to return to, once we see what happens over there, I would be able to exercise some discretion and say, yeah, I think we can. Now, having said all of that, it's also entirely possible that I say I have no comfort and council says we will not risk manage it. And at the end of March 2025, there's a surplus. My position is simply that I have no comfort one way or the other. I suppose I'm neutral on it.
Councillor Siski.
And the figures don't include any of the outstanding questions that we have at the RCMP waiting for a response in terms of funding.
Councillor Stetsky, through the mayor, that's correct. So we also did discuss the LOAs, the proposed LOAs that had gone through to the RCMP for some additional cost sharing, or for some cost sharing, pardon me. So that the intent of that would be that the province would provide some funding support for our MEs to support the non-municipal members that are currently housed at the detachment. So there's been no answer on that. And similarly, there's been no response there's been nothing further since Wednesday or November 20th on the approval for the renovation project.
So basically, this is a status quo worst case scenario.
That is correct. Under the current conditions, yes.
All good? Back to you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Mayor Price. The transit cost line will see a $153,000 increase in 2025, representing a 0.3% increase. So financing costs, a reduction of $228,000. That is primarily the $160,000 that we eliminated from interest payments for tax prepayments. It ends up in that line item.
Councillor Brissette.
So do we have a choice on the transit increase?
Councillor Blissett through to the mayor, or sorry,
Yeah,
through the mayor. No, not, I mean, we've gone through the work of looking at reducing the routes so pardon me, I'm not answering that very well. What I would add to this is we're currently undergoing the review of our transit service.
Yes.
So that would be probably where we could have some input. I believe it's currently out for consultation with the public and other stakeholders. So council should expect to see something back from that particular exercise early in the new year. So there may be some opportunities there.
Okay. Okay, so I interrupted what you were saying on financing costs. If you could go through that, that'd be good. Sorry.
Councillor Papa.
Yes, before we get to the next section, so the 0.43% tax increase, but when it comes to this is the public transit piece, right? Where we subsidize the public transit about $800,000-ish. So
It's about $1 million.
we subsidize it $1 million?
Yes,
Okay, so
the
this
two
is-
systems, yes.
So this is, it's a 10% plus tax increase on the public transit. And what's the rationale for it? Just rising costs going up for fuel? I mean,
Councillor Popoff, through the mayor, we have, I think we've had some brief discussions about this. Our maintenance costs are particularly high. And I know BC Transit is working to reduce those, but that has had a major impact on our system. There are also other smaller ancillary impacts, but I would say the maintenance costs are the primary drivers.
it's just to my memory in the last 10 years, I don't think we've seen, the $150,000 one-time cost increase for our public transit. So it seems like it's higher than normal.
Further? Charlotte?
Okay, returning to Councillor Blissette's request to restate, thank you, the financing costs. So that $228,000 reduction is, the majority of that is the $160,000 that we took out of the budget for interest payments on prepaid taxes. And then there's also about a $36,000 reduction for existing debt issues in the general fund. So as issues renew, there are often adjustments to the amounts that we end up paying, that we have to pay. Moving on to the interest revenue reduction. So that $176,000 reduction representing almost 0.5% increase, that's the amount that stays in the general fund bank account. Most of our interest is transferred back through to the reserves because that's where most of the money sits. So this is a reduction in the amount that the general bank will earn in 2025 based on anticipated
Go ahead.
return.
Councillor Brissette, one more, and then we'll go to Councillor.
So that's a choice by us I mean, we're funding a reserve, is what you're saying, is that 0.49% is because we're anticipating less income and we want to see that income in there, but it's not being used. Like so we could make a choice on the 0.49, if I interpret correctly.
Councillor Blissett, through Mayor Price, the 176 or the 0.49 that's a reduction in the interest revenue funding general operations. Yeah. And yes, there is, and we'll talk about that. We'll show council how much interest is funneled through to the reserves to fund the reserves. So I'm not even sure. Doesn't the bylaw say we have to? Yeah. So the bylaw says that we have interest that is earned on the funds sitting in the reserve must be allocated to the reserve proportionate to the balance in that reserve. So currently the bylaw states that.
But we don't know what our surplus is yet, so we're not even sure how much money is going into reserves yet.
Councillor Bissett, through the mayor, what you're referring to is that waterfalling that we have done. But in addition to that, there are pre-established tax-funded transfers to the reserve.
Right.
So there are three, and Charlene is going to walk us through that, where all the different things that fund our reserves, taxes, interest, grants, other revenue, whatever it is. So there's a multitude of sources of funding that go into our reserves. So what you're asking me about is the waterfalling of surplus. That's
Mhm.
one thing, but there are.
We don't know that yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Councillor Graham?
Yeah, thank you. When did we embed interest revenue into the budget? Like, to me, interest revenue should be part of a surplus conversation, not part of a taxation reduction, because we can't guarantee interest revenue. So when did that become embedded into a budget where we need to tax to make up for interest revenue that we don't get?
Councillor Graham, through the mayor, in my time, it's always been there like that. It's always been like that. And
Okay, so we count on interest revenue as not as a surplus, but as a way to bring, like, we use that interest revenue for taxation. So if the interest rates aren't there, then we have to tax for it.
Councillor Graham through the mayor, that is correct. Similarly, when we have excess interest revenue, and if we're not also at the same time dealing with trying to catch up on inflation, and those two things probably go hand in hand, then the excess interest that we earn ends up in surplus, and we have the waterfall. It becomes part of the waterfall discussion. Does it go into reserves, financial stabilization, wherever it goes? But what you're saying is correct.
So how, like, to me, on a budgeting perspective on that with, I know it's only 0.5%, but it could be more, or it could be less. Why wouldn't we flag that and get it pulled right out of there? Because it's not a known number, and we're budgeting based on, we budget based on known numbers. That's an unknown. So then, like, to me, to have that in is like, well, we have to raise taxes because we didn't get as much in interest. That shouldn't even be a factor, because we don't have solid numbers to work with then.
Councillor Graham, through the mayor, exactly. So at some point, you would have to bite the bullet of getting rid of $400,000 or whatever the number is that you are currently receiving in revenue, to say, pull that out and say it's not revenue. So that $400,000 will impact your increase in that 1 year that you do that. And no one has ever suggested we do that or discussed doing that, because to get it out will result in an increase.
No, but my point is, it's not 400,000 because it moves with interest rates. So it's a fluctuating number that we can't bank on. So it makes it really difficult. It's no different than our new building, that we get. But we just throw a dart at the wall and hope we hit it. And I feel like that works for maybe a certain part of a budget, but to be that reliant on it then brings these issues up.
So Councillor Graham, through the mayor, you're absolutely correct. And for many, many years, it was never an issue because interest rates were stable. And it's only here in the last few years that we're seeing this type of fluctuation. And so if that is council's desire to pull whatever interest we earn in the general fund that isn't allocated over to a reserve or a DCC, if council wants to pull that out and have tax revenue cover that, and I suspect, you might, if that's your desire, then we would probably want to smooth that in somehow, but it will add to your tax increase.
Thank you for that explanation, Charlotte.
All right, the next item is the grants to organizations. So that's an item we'll touch on briefly today. $66,000 increase over prior year. So council is aware that we have this 1% cap, and the reason it isn't equal to the 1% is because we did not award up to the maximum last year. So that's why you're seeing the 66,000. But in our discussion today and in the memo that I provided to council, council may want to have a discussion about reducing the increase to the grant pot. You may want to consider holding it at the 2024 levels or some other version of that. So that's a discussion we can have a little bit later today, where we talk about that in a little bit more detail. So wages and benefits no longer smooth in. So the net is $166,292. So in a number of the discussions we've had with council about funding new positions, we're smoothing them in. We're 25% in year 1, 50% in year 2. So this is the amount that's hitting the tax levy due to those decisions.
So new positions.
Sometimes, yeah, in prior years, yeah. And the wages item is $935,000, equal to 2.61% increase. Benefits, including WCB, $209,000 increase, equal to 0.59%. We've had a lot of discussions about the WCB increase. And then inflation, net of new revenue or revenue increases and the non-market change. So that's.
Councillor Graham has a question. I think yeah. Sorry, Charlotte.
Are we working on, or is that data coming forward on WCB? Like with the graph of showing how much of it increase is due strictly to wages, how much is due for physical injury and mental health?
Yeah, we'll have that to you, council, in the new year. Yeah.
So just to finish off that $378,000, so that's all, insurance, parts and supplies, fuel. So it's all of that netted together, and netted out the increases. For example, the cemetery increases, I think the increase was about $50,000. So that's netted out in there. The increases over at Western Financial Place. So that's netted out, and that has resulted in the $378,000 inflation increase. So that brings us to the 8.87 that we talked to council about on Wednesday. As Councillor Blissett has highlighted, and also along the lines of the discussion about grants, there are opportunities out there to adjust that. So, but this is where we're at. This is the number. We've done everything from our perspective in terms of increasing revenues and making adjustments for where resources are needed more rather than less. So this number continues services as they were in 2024.
Councillor Bissett.
Thank you. So we still, those suggestions from staff on ways we might economize other than the not paying interest, we haven't discussed those, so that's still to come.
That's exactly right, Councillor Blissett. So at the end of today, we'll have a wrap-up discussion about that. And also, if council has anything over and above what's already been out there in the public sphere, some ideas that you might have that you'd like us to take a look at, those, we're very eager to hear those at the end of today, and we can do the work needed to suss that out before we get together again on January 15th.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we're going to get to nonprofit grants later, but just to briefly touch on it. So the proposal we're going to talk about later in the agenda, looking at potentially funding just to the same, I think, actual level as 2024.
I hadn't really thought about it in that kind of detail, but certainly or to the cap for 2000. Yeah, and you're right.
Okay.
You're right. Yeah.
So anyways, so that 0.18% increase that we're currently showing, if we were to decide to hold it to whatever 2024 level we identified that corresponds to the 0.18%, if we took that off of the current forecast we're looking at, then we'd be back to 8.69% for a tax increase. I just
I
wanted
haven't
to
done the
flag
math,
that.
but sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Charlotte.
All right. So we will move on to the next section in the agenda. So I'm going to turn it over to Charlene to walk us through the borrowing and the reserves. There's a good chance that Charlene and I will have some discussions as the presentation moves on, but she's definitely the one with the granular knowledge. So let me put up.
Okay.
Ross, are you putting, or Daryl, are you putting that up?
Annual payment. Well,
Okay. Okay.
26.
So we're on page 23. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we're on page 23. We're go over the borrowing, the new borrowing. So we have Shadow Mountain, which is the LAS. It's 9 million.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're just trying to get it up on the screen.
It's page 23 of your package.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're looking for it.
23
Norma.
23 out of 109.
We're gonna get it up on the screen.
Hey, are we good? Okay. So the first is Shadow Mountain, and it's 9,120,300, and that's paid through the LAS. The fire engine at $1 million, and that's debt servicing of $301,528. Gold Creek Dam, 14 million, and that's debt servicing of $831,198. Western Financial Place, the Ephes Walls at 5 million, debt servicing of 376,805. Phillips Reservoir Bypass Pipeline at 9.1 million, debt servicing of 540,279. RCMP Building Design and Reno of 8.4 million, 8.4, 703, 920 million. Debt servicing of $638,604. Sorry. Phillips Reservoir Water UV disinfection of $3,341,237. And that is debt servicing of $198,368. The water trunk main at 2.5 million, and that's a debt servicing of 148,428. The airport water sewer system, 3.5 million, debt servicing of 207,799.
Darlene?
Yes.
I have a question on,
Okay,
on the airport. So we're doing the borrowing. The airport is paying,
correct.
that doesn't show up
Right, that,
in our,
that's-
in our tax levy, does it?
no, it does
No,
not. That
thank you very
that is
much.
funded
Yeah,
by the airport fund.
just wanted to be
which is
clear on that.
completely separate from
Yeah,
the
totally.
general
Gotcha.
tax.
Yeah.
Okay. The Phillips Reservoir twinning supply of 2,149,000, and that's debt servicing of 127,588. Transfer pipeline phase 2, that's 2 million, and debt servicing of 118,742. The sanitary sewer, 15th Avenue Baker Park, $2,475,312. That's debt servicing of 146,963. Water treatment plant is in the budget at 16,666,667, for debt servicing of $1,084,245. And finally, the satellite fire station at $10 million and debt servicing of $593,713.
Thank you. Councillor Graham, Councillor Stetsky. Councillor Bissett.
Yeah, so just so I'm just kind of running things here. So in 2026, excluding the airport, that'll be just to service that debt will be just 5.5% tax increase, correct?
Again, I don't have, Councillor Graham through the mayor, I don't have the math done, but the other thing you need to look at here is it's not all general fund borrowing.
Right.
Some of this is water fund borrowing, so that will show up in the frontage taxes, not in the property taxes.
It's just one pocket or the other. It still comes out of my wallet.
And Shadow Mountain is not paid by our taxpayers either. Yeah.
That's right, 100%
Okay.
the resident.
Counselor Stetsky?
Yeah, thank you. And that was my first question, just to reassure everyone that the interest on Shadow Mountain is also paid by the residents, not by taxpayers in the.
Correct. The principal and interest payments are all covered by the residents.
And what's the difference in terms? Why are some 20 and some 30?
That's really, 30 is, MFA limits us, we can only borrow up to 30 years. And it's based on the life of the asset. So actually, some of the life of these assets are actually longer than the 30 years. So some of the infrastructure, we estimate 50 years, but we can only borrow up to 30 years. Buildings, generally we borrow up to 20 years. The fire engine is a short term, and that's 5 years.
And last question, I believe the master plan for the fire people said there would not be a satellite, there'd be a new fire station, and you've got it listed here as a satellite again. But I think that was supposed to be just one main fire station in a new location, if I remember the discussion.
Maybe just to just further that, Mayor Price through Councillor Stetsky, right now, because it's out there in the 5-year plan until we have those numbers solidified, it's simply a placeholder like a lot of the things are in the longer end of the 5-year plan. So once we get a clearer picture, then that will change.
Counselor Popoff?
Yes, thank you. And what we learned the other day with respect to the Gold Creek Dam of 14 million, that's if we don't get any grant funding. So if we get
Exactly.
those 2, 5, and 5, it'll be a $4 million borrowing process. And also, I think, subject to our study on the main trunk line coming from Phillip Reservoir, may determine what we need to do further with the Phillips Reservoir twinning supply. And last, we've been kicking the water treatment plant forward for the last 10 years. So again, it's a placeholder. And with the new UV system coming on board, that might be kicked out for another 10 years.
Good points, Counselor Popoff. Counselor Ray?
Thank you. Just a small point of clarification. So just to ensure I'm on the right page, just want to clarify that residents of Shadow Mountain are city residents, correct?
They do not pay. No, there's no impact on the city residents.
No, that's what I'm clarifying.
Oh,
So
I'm
to
sorry.
clarify,
Yeah. Ooh, yes.
CFO, residents of Shadow Mountain are City of Cranbrook residents. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That is correct. Mark.
Thank you.
Yes.
So the clarification is that the City of Cranbrook residents who live in Shadow Mountain are the folks who are specifically paying for this, and it is not being borne by the other City of Cranbrook residents who do not live in Shadow Mountain. So just for all of us to have the mindset that Shadow Mountain residents are City of Cranbrook residents.
Good point, Counselor Ray. I stand corrected on that. My bad. I just want to comment on this, guys. You know, I mean, really, you look at anything on there, that's our reality, except maybe the last two, you know, they're way out there, but, you know, and this is critical infrastructure. And, you know, I'm willing to bet that at the end of this budget cycle, when we break things down on the percentage that goes to core services, we're going to be quite surprised that that's what we're really budgeting for here. I mean, you know, and in all fairness, some of these maybe could have been done at another time. Again, funding. We all know that, you know, infrastructure funding, every local government depends on senior level government assistance. We haven't been getting it to the level we need to stay ahead of it. Guess what? The day's arrived. We're past due. Okay? So we're the council that's faced with, you know, these hard bills and hard decisions. So just on that, Charlotte, real quick on the fire engine, and I see 5 years here. There's a 20-year life on those apparatus, and RDK's paying 20. Well, not really 20%, but we factored in 20% in the agreement with them, the fire services agreement. So we've got the replacement of apparatus factored in there. Could we not? Because I'm looking at 2026 next year. we're going to be in the same situation again if we, we're not paring back. And I don't need an answer today, but consideration for a 20-year borrowing or even 10-year that would cut that annual payment down significantly. Just a thought for next year. You don't need to worry about it right now. Or Charlotte, Charlene, if you care to
I
comment.
just want to respond to that, Mayor Price. So the fire engine, we normally fund fire engines through the MFA equipment financing, and that under that structure, it's set up to be 5 years.
Oh, it has to be, okay.
Yeah, we could go out longer, but then you'd have to do the AAP
Yeah,
process.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Charlotte?
Thank you, thank you, Mayor Price. So the next schedule on page 25 is debt expiring. Okay, so this was something that came up last year, and you'll see it. I'm pretty sure it will be reflected in some of your schedules when we look at reserves. When these debt issues are expiring, we have transferred those debt payments into the reserves. There was a comment made last year that council would have liked to have been included in that discussion about whether or not that was the right move. Because the other side of that, of course, is that in the case of the upgrade to the fire hall, for example, where the debt payments are $248,000 and the last payment is in 2025, in 2026, what staff have done is shifted that $248,000 to reserve funding. The discussion last year was whether or not that should happen. Should that $248,000 be returned to the taxpayer in the form of we no longer have that debt payment? So I think this is perhaps some discussion around whether or not that is the appropriate steps. The other thing I will say is when you start to look at our reserves, quite frankly, whether it's funded like this or we increase taxes to,
Exactly.
create new transfers to the reserves need the funding. Without these transfers to the reserves will not be able to fund the projects that we talked about on the 20th of November and on Wednesday.
Councilor Bassat?
Thank you. I mean, that kind of relates to that 0.49 interest revenue reduction. So we have in here that we're going to charge for that, but really that offsets that. So that should be, like, to my way of thinking, I'd see nil on there because we're no longer paying the 248, which is whatever percent. And here you're saying you're anticipating an interest rate reduction. So the way I'd run it is I'd say that works out in the wash. I'd get rid of the 0.49 on the tax increase.
Councillor Blissett, if I'm following. So they're two different things.
Yeah, I know.
So
But
if
you're
we
gonna-
continue, so if we continue the $248,000, because that's what would happen is in 2025, the $248,000 is debt payments. In 2026, the $248,000 becomes a transfer to reserve.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. There's no impact on the tax levy. Alternatively, you don't put it to the reserve and it's a savings to your tax levy increase.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I'm
it's in
suggesting.
2026, not in 2025. It won't,
Yeah.
it won't help you in 2025
Oh,
2026.
because you still have a payment in 2025 that you have to make.
so there's nothing that we're getting out of for 2025?
Not out of this slide, no, but it is a slide we've started to show council because we are seeing issues that are maturing. So it is a discussion we need to have because in 2031 will be the first year where there will be no payment on Western Financial Place. So there will some decisions will need to be made on that.
So that's kind of a Peter and Paul thing, right?
For sure,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
then, but I'm looking, we can talk about it maybe next year.
Yeah.
Because we're sitting at 7.30 next year and that's probably not desirable. So we may want to use it to drop that tax levy a bit next year. Anyways, we'll talk about that next year.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
next year.
Yep. Counselor Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a good discussion, and it sounds like part of the issue is just around transparency. And so I don't know if there's room for a policy, like if we were to say, oh, okay, our default policy is, if you wanted to go with past practice, that when we retire a debt, we then redirect that same amount of money to fund reserves. That could be a policy. And then if you say, oh, okay, this year we want to have an exception to the policy, council could pass a motion saying for year X, we're going to have an exception to the policy. We're not just going to funnel that money into a reserve. We're going to take it off the tax levy. But I think it is an issue of transparency so that everybody knows what's going on in council and the public. So it's just more transparent.
With
So-
a caveat in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Floor is yours, ladies.
Okay, so if we go to the next slide, it will show us the summary of the debt servicing costs. That's page 27. There we go. That's really hard to read up there anyhow, so.
Can you blow it up at all?
A little bit.
That's
There
better.
we go. Okay, so this basically, what this schedule shows you, it shows you for the general fund, shows you the current debt servicing, so the debt that we already are servicing. And then the next line is the new debt. So the new borrowing that I showed you on the first slide is, the debt servicing is in here. So in 2026, that would be the fire engine.
That's servicing costs.
So,
If we agree to it at that time, next year, yeah.
yeah, so, and then, so the water fund, sewer fund, solid waste, and the airport. And the solid waste fund, that's the garbage trucks. So then if you go down to there, you can see the total current debt servicing. So in 2025, it's 3.4. That's the total current, and then to add to that would be the new debt servicing, which
We're just discussing that $790,000
Yeah.
new debt in 2025 should be removed
Yeah.
because there is no new debt in 2025. So our apologies for that.
Yeah, so that's the sewer fund? one?
No, Councilor Bissett, down at the very bottom, we talk about total current debt servicing, 3,416,000.
Yeah,
And then underneath that is that $790,000 new debt. That
new
shouldn't
debt.
be there
What's-
because there is no,
that's the solid waste.
it's the
and
yeah, it's
sewer.
the 541. Anyhow, I'd have to go back and look at that one more time.
Could you see
Yeah.
where that's, so you're saying it's not in the sewer fund and it's not in the solid waste fund? That new debt, because that's where that's coming from.
Yeah, there's new debt in the sewer fund. That would be the LAS.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So is it there or not?
Charlene's calculating.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Yeah.
so it is part, I'm just trying to, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm-
because there is new debt.
I
Yeah.
think what I would just highlight to council here is that, until we walk through this door at 1 o'clock, things are still moving a
Yeah,
little bit.
a
So
lot.
there are a few little, some inconsistencies in some of these schedules, and we do apologize for that. We try very, very hard to make sure there aren't, but every once in a while, something does slip through.
Yeah. So then at the bottom, you can see that our debt servicing limit, and this is based on 2023 revenue.
Is that so the so that means that $14 million debt servicing limit means that's the total amount of debt payments, interest and principal, that we are allowed to carry based on our debt servicing limit. So that would be 100% of our debt servicing limit.
Yeah. So then, yeah, oh, sorry.
So you'll recalculate 2025 because it would be significantly less than 29%. If you remove that 790,000.
Yeah, so sorry, that 700 and I crossed out, but that 790 should be 541, so it'll be a little bit less. Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
won't be on the solid waste then?
So that 29.36% will be a little bit less, so probably about 27%. I think.
For solid
But-
waste, your truck is still funded, right?
Yeah, my truck is funded.
So, and so is this.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is 790.
Don't understand how.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, it's Friday afternoon, it's been a long week. We're very sorry. That is correct. So the $249,000 in the solid waste fund is the truck, and the $541,000, is that the LAS?
Yeah, yes.
But
I
that's
was-
only if we're buying a new recycling truck or what?
No, this is for the current garbage truck. So,
It's already been done.
yeah, so it's already been, it was approved and it was purchased, so it's new debt for this.
Okay,
So then,
That's what's-
are you
that's what's
adding
confusing.
250 every single year? Sorry.
Councilor Graham.
I just don't understand.
Just so everybody's aware, the province looks at, is looking at our debt limits, and they're seeing 43, 33, or 28% of use. And they're pushing and saying municipalities have lots of headroom. And so you will see the province looking at things with grant funding and everything else coming out from some of the meetings I was in last year, and they're pushing and saying municipalities can still borrow money. So they're pushing hard on that, but we still have to pay for that. But they're looking at our credit card and lots of municipalities across the province, and they're saying, you got lots of room. What's your problem?
Yeah,
And
and
that's
that's
a
happening
problem for
across
us.
Canada. Yeah, totally. Councilor Brissette.
Sorry about all the free flow there, but I don't, so when you're saying new debt, that's in addition to what it was last year.
Correct.
So every single year we're adding $550,000 more than the original? So now it's up to $1 million? You know what I'm saying? Like that's.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but that's not exactly how that schedule works. So,
Okay.
so if you look at the solid waste, so that the new garbage trucks.
Yeah.
So that's the same debt payment. So instead of putting it up to current debt in 2026, I'm just keeping that in.
I see.
it's the
You're not
same
moving,
debt
you're not
service.
moving
Yeah.
it out of, into older debt. Got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I
Because
really,
I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you're adding this every single year?
yeah,
Councilor
Okay.
Peabody.
sorry.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So, Charlotte, I understand, like, on one hand, you want to pay off things during the lifetime of the asset. But on the other hand, like, we're also worried about maxing out our servicing limit. So, we see things that we're, financing out to 30 years, 30 years, 30 years. But are we also shooting ourselves in the foot where we are seeing more things that we have to borrow for? And if we keep servicing things out to 30 years, does that give us more risk of maxing ourselves out as opposed to trying to pay it off in a shorter amount of time?
Councillor Peabody through the mayor. So there's always risk when you're there. You always have interest rate risk when you have an item that goes out so far. We try to weigh the impacts of a shorter amortization period, which of course would result in a higher increase in the year that we enter into the instrument. So I wouldn't say, we don't look at something that we would typically borrow for 30 years and say, let's try and pay that off in 10. That is not part of our analysis, because there is also, and we've talked about this before, there's also this whole idea of intergenerational equity. So, and this is something we talk about quite a bit. I know Charlene has been working on her debt policy, trying to get that sort of wrapped up, and that would tie in with something what Councillor Ray said earlier. But, so who pays? So if it's a 30-year asset, if the asset is a 50-year asset, and you're going to try and make the taxpayers in the first 10 years pay for that entire asset, that's not fair. That doesn't meet the when you start looking at intergenerational equity, right? Are you going to pay for something that your children are going to not have to pay anything for? So there is a blend consideration there.
Yeah, so supplemental, if I may. So I guess looking at the bigger picture, this is where asset management plan is going to come into play of like, what is our debt servicing going to be, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? Because we're going to see some assets that are probably on the verge of expiring in 10, 15, 20 years, and what that cost is going to be. So like, I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but I guess at what point are we going to kind of see this asset management plan and have a good idea as far as like what does the future for Cranbrook look like as far as debt servicing goes and asset management?
Councillor Peabody, those are all really meaty topics for discussion. And, CAO Furcho and I were talking about this the other day in terms of reserve funding. If you can picture a spreadsheet, because I live there, so that lists every asset we own and takes into account when we put it into service, what's the life expectancy, some sort of an inflation factor, and you divide it straight line amortization, and you say in 2025, for all our 1,000 assets, we need to be putting this into, and at the point the discussion was about reserves. That's the amount you need to fund your reserves in 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. That isn't what we're doing right now. And I know I'm not talking about borrowing, but I'll get to that. So what we're doing right now is we're saying we're funding our reserve levels, we're funding our reserves based on these transfers to reserves that Charlene will walk us through from taxes. And we are fitting in our projects that need to be done. And so far we're staying above water. By that I mean we're not drawing the reserves down to negative, but we are not funding it as I've described it. So there will come a time when there will be, and I don't know when that is because I don't have that spreadsheet, but there will come a time where there's this big bubble that I can't fund from the current strategy of funding the reserves. So then you can also have the discussion of, do we fund everything from reserves? What are we funding from reserves? What do we borrow for versus saving for? Because that also takes into account the intergenerational equity. So it is you're probably not going to get it bang on, but if we put some thought into what is our strategy, what is our belief? Do we say, if it's recapitalization, we don't borrow? Because that's what a number of these debt policies say. Recapitalization, we don't borrow. New assets, we borrow. But some of the recapitalization, like is Gold Creek Dam recapitalization, what is that, right? So some of it's recapitalization because you're improving the asset, the spillway is bigger. And so it's not a black and white, it's very nuanced. And at some point we'll have to land on something. And then as we start to get into these balloon years, we'll have to be nimble. We'll have to be able to be nimble around that.
Thank you, Char. That was a really good explanation. We got Councillor Graham, then Councillor Ray, please.
Yeah, and just one question, when we're looking at these and new debt and new things coming on and retiring debt, is would we be prudent to, rather than just retiring the debt and maybe moving it to a surplus, keep it with that, like fire hall? So it just goes into the recapitalization reserve for that building rather than just to a general surplus. So like it's still tagged to the original purpose of the tax increase to begin with.
Councillor Graham, through the mayor, that's what we've done. So where the fire hall debt retires, that goes into the facilities reserve. Now, we haven't gone that next step where we're saying that money is going to be set aside for the new fire hall. That hasn't been done, but it's going into the facilities reserve.
Thank you. Councillor Ray, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a brief comment further to our CFO's comment about that intergenerational kind of debt burden and benefiting from assets. If we think of the Memorial Arena built in 1952, really those folks of the day bore, I think, most of that initial cost, right? And it has benefited multiple generations. And we know we've had some big fixes in 72 and 2010, and most recently this last year. But just to keep in mind with that intergenerational benefit, we are still benefiting from stuff that people did generations ago. And things we do now will benefit generations in the future. So I think we need to keep that in mind. It's not sort of all about me, all about my tax dollar. We need to keep in mind we are still benefiting from the tax dollars from generations past, and things we're doing now will benefit future generations. So that we have to keep that long view in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point, Councilor Ray, because really, we're playing catch up right now, but it's going to benefit the future. So yeah, for sure. All yours, Shirley.
Are there any more questions? And just want to apologize for that mix-up. That schedule is correct, so. Okay. So we will carry on to reserves if there's no more questions about borrowing. So page 29 of your package. So this first is a summary of the reserve fund balances. So you can see the 2025 and then where we're at in 2029.
Balances.
Yeah, so this is a summary behind it. Behind the summary is the detail of what why the reserve was set up, what the purpose of the reserve is. And basically the optimum and minimum balances where we like to get to.
If council would just,
Do you want me to go through?
yeah, I
Fine?
do, but I just
Yeah.
wanted to make a comment on the balances on page 29. So you will see that by 2029, we're lower than we are budgeted to be in 2025.
Yep.
But in addition to that is so you have the airport capital reserve in there, and I always give a little warning to council that this, of course, is not available for any of our own assets, any other city assets other than the airport. And also the sewer desludging reserve under the capital sewer reserve. By 2029, the balance in that reserve is scheduled to be $2.7 million. So that is something we're very consciously and actively saving for. So if you remove the balance of the desludging reserve from that $24 million, we're going in, our reserve balances are not improving. Let me say that.
Councilor Stetsky.
So the numbers listed here are where we're at without any changes.
Councillor Stetsky, that's correct. So those are budgeted, and a lot of stuff can happen. For example, we haven't finalized what's happening in 2024 yet. So all the projects in 2024, some will get carried forward, some will. I think we've picked up all the ones that are going to be abandoned, and some will come in under budget, et cetera, et cetera. So the balances here in 2025 assume that everything planned for 2024 happens and happens as planned, and assumes that everything in 2025 happens as planned.
So Charlotte, looking at this from here to 2029, certainly, if you look at our reserve policy with our targets, our low and our highs, we're in the low range right now. I would suggest in most of our reserves, but and saying that, we're probably the next 5 years, we're going to really be struggling unless we get some new revenue somewhere. We're struggling to get into a kind of a comfort zone anywhere in our reserves. I don't see any place for, the water falling and this, the nice stuff we want to do going forward. It's not possible for the next 5 years, what I'm seeing here, unless we get new revenues, significant new revenues.
Mayor Price, yes, we're not seeing the water falling of
No.
days of yore, that's for sure. And the reason for that is because, you know, we've wrung the budget. You know, so we used to have buffers. There used to be buffers in our budget, but those are all, have all mostly disappeared.
The only reason I pointed out is a reality check for everybody going forward, right? There's going to be tough years going forward here. So, Councillor, I believe Popoff, Graham, and no, Councillor Graham, Councillor Peabody, Councillor Ray.
Yeah, just a question on the Parkland acquisition reserve. I know that we were, part of that is money from developers in the past of money in lieu instead of green space. Has that changed now that we have the Parks DCC? So anybody developing is now paying that Parks DCC. So are we still taking money in lieu of green space or making green space because of what we're taxing them now with the DCC?
I think that's probably a question for Curtis, but I have not seen any recent payments that we've taken in lieu for green space. And we do have a DCC park set up. This reserve is mandatory, so once you put the money in there, you can only pull it out to buy more green space, more parks.
Councillor Peabody?
Thank you, Mayor. Really quick, the big contributions to the Moyer Park Reserve, that's just paying back the Memorial Arena roof. Is that correct?
Sorry, that land sales reserve, did you say?
The Moyer Park
Oh, the Moyer
Development
Park.
Reserve? Is that, because that's where we borrowed, yeah.
Yes, that's.
So
and
that's,
there's
yeah, so the
interest.
big contributions, that's paying off the roof.
So I'm just
Yes.
gonna let Charlene kind of. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So thank you, CAO Furcho, through, Councillor Peabody, through the mayor. So in 2025, there will be no principal payment to the Moyer Park. That is, we've removed that. I do believe, I'll just let Charlene try and find that, and maybe we should just wait till we get to the Moyer Park Reserve, but I don't believe we've discontinued the principal payments in other years. So it's only in 2025 we've discontinued it. And this is a really tough one because this one I'm very comfortable, so it's not tough, pardon me. I'm very comfortable with not making that principal repayment at this time because I feel like at some point, sooner rather than later, hopefully, someone here on staff, one of us will be able to make the decision that the money that we transferred out is not going to be needed in the Moyer Park Reserve. The money that stays in the Moyer Park Reserve is sufficient for what it is we need to do. But my understanding is there are a number of variables still outstanding in terms of the contractors that were in the gravel pit and, you know, what exactly is it, what kind of park exactly is it we're going to do? And there are some other unresolved issues around that. So I'm very comfortable with council, with removing that requirement that council pay back the principal. I'm not comfortable, though, not repaying the interest because at some point that, you know, could come back and bite us. In the long run, if that interest is, or if the interest is creating a balance in the Moyer Reserve that we don't need, we can move that as well. So we just need all this stuff to settle out. And I'm just gonna, I think Charlene has maybe found.
So the Moore Park Reserve, so in 2025, it's just the interest portion, which is the 92,400. And then there's general interest that goes in there, just interest on the balance of the reserve.
And are principal payments resuming in 26?
Yes, the principal payments resume in 2026.
Okay. And just an update for council, the interest payment of $92,000 is quite a bit less than we had originally talked about because of course interest rates have gone down. So that interest has been adjusted accordingly.
Councillor Ray?
Thank you, Mayor. So I am jumping ahead to reserve fund balances with descriptions. So do you want me to wait? Do you have some items to speak to that and then I'll ask my question?
I think we're fine to move along, so unless you want me to go line by line on this
No.
schedule, yeah, so we're good to
Don't think
move,
that's necessary.
so on page 31, we have the reserve funds with descriptions, why they were set up, what the funding sources are, minimum optimal levels. And so, and yeah,
Thank you. Thank you very much for this information. This might be a place, and I know we are pressed for time during this process, so I understand fully that we did not have an opportunity to consider this for today, but this might be a place where we could start using that color coding of green, amber, red when we look at what our optimum levels are versus what our balances are. So that just might be a helpful tool for council, right? Because there's some that clearly are in red where our reserve fund is well below the identified optimum level, right? Some of them I know have not applicable, and some of them have a narrative description of what the minimum and the optimum would be. It would be helpful to have numbers there rather than a narrative description.
So under the optimum levels, so basically it's to fully fund the capital infrastructure replacement. So it's it's difficult to put a number there because we need that to look at the asset management plan and do that at least 10 years out. We'll have, I don't know if I'm explaining, Charlotte, do you want to?
Yeah, I sympathize with the struggle. Councillor Ray through the mayor. The other reason that there isn't a finite number on there is to create some flexibility in the policy as well. So I understand that it's helpful that there are numbers, but it just fluctuates. So the need fluctuates so much, and as Charlene is also referring to, this 5-year capital plan that we target is really, it's not ideal for capital planning because it's too short a timeline. So that is more of a concern to me than this, because this is important and it's useful, but we need to start looking more, as I was describing earlier, we need to start looking at that more. This is okay, this is great, but it needs to be more granular than this. And I'll stop it there, I think.
For sure. I mean, I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of asset management and having these conversations. So I think it's just a, question of that continuous improvement and where we can put in our best estimations in terms of numbers. It just helps us, right? Look at where we're at.
If I might just add one other comment, Councillor Ray and Council through the mayor. When our policy was developed, I don't want to say we were early days in asset management, but we were starting to gain traction. And so there were a lot of unknowns. And so that is, as I recall, one of the reasons to embed some flexibility in that policy was knowing that we were, on the cusp of all these great things that we've been seeing and where we're going, and the policy would grow as we grew.
Okay, so moving along with this, the description, so the capital works reserve, so would you like to go line by line?
I don't think we
there
need
was
to.
just, I just
think
wanted
everyone's
to
had a look
add,
at
I
those.
just wanted
They're
to,
pretty straightforward, I think.
okay, I just wanted to.
Councillor Bissett?
Thanks. I'm just wondering about the downtown parking reserve fund. When are we actually going to see new parking meters and the computerized thing and et cetera?
So we've finished the plan for the downtown parking and we are coming into council in the new year with that in a committee of the whole for a discussion on, a fulsome discussion on what we want to do going forward with the downtown parking. So thank you for that, and it is coming.
Thank you. Further? Good. Okay, we can move on.
Okay, I just wanted to add, so the community works gas tax reserve, that is an example of reserve that we don't actually need to keep a balance in. So that reserve, the gas tax, we should actually be spending it as we receive it. So moving on, we'll move on to the,
I got a question. I'm seeing more and more funding for studies. Especially, where we are in our utilities. And these are pretty costly studies, what we're into this year, 250,000 here and would we not be better off hiring our own in-house expert that all they do is these studies, so we don't, I don't know, I just like to see the comparison, what we're spending over a 5-year period in studies, and if we had one staff member, an engineer dedicated to undertaking these studies, because that's a lot of money going out on studies. So I'll just leave that for now. It's something to talk about later. Councilor Bissett.
When you mentioned that about the gas tax reserve, so there's $1 million in there right now, it says. Is that anticipated that's coming in for this year, or do we have that in the bank now that we can use for money?
that's anticipating that it's coming in.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, so that's
Yes.
future revenue. Right now, there's nothing in it?
We do have a opening balance in it, but we will be spending it. So we do have quite a few projects that we're spending it, and you can
From
see.
gas, because that was in our budget the
Yes,
other day.
yeah. And the gas tax, there's criteria. We can only spend it on certain things.
Sure.
It's not something that we can just use for
Willy-nilly.
operating costs, right? Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So if we want to move forward to the reserve contributions, and this is page 35 of the package. So this highlights what's going into each reserve and what the source of funding is. Yeah, so you can see for 2025, for the general fund, what's being funded from tax is $6.3 million.
So if I might, counsel, so in that capital works reserve, okay, in that capital works reserve, so that's where the road dedicated tax goes. It goes in and it comes out. So that is pretty representative. I don't know if there's anything else in those tax dollars, Charlene, other than the road dedicated tax?
I do have it in a separate line,
Okay.
and that's for major repairs.
Okay, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So what I just wanted to highlight here was in 2025, of the 6 million going to reserves, 3.6 of it is to fund basically the road program. And I just wanted to also highlight, now I'm just going to try and find which one it is. It is the fleet and heavy equipment reserve. So in 2025, the contribution from taxes is $526,000. Next year, it's slated to be 626, then 926, then $1,026,000, and then $1,226,000. And these amounts, these increases are funded from taxes. So 526 to 626, that's a $100,000 increase next year, which will impact your tax increase. The year after that, it's a $300,000 increase. So these are increases needed to fund the projects that are in the 5-year financial plan.
Councilor Bissett.
So we still don't know what is surplus, so that will add to those reserves. So that's not included in this. This is all just taxation.
Councilor Bissett through the mayor, yes, we don't know what the surplus is, but as I said a few minutes ago, the years of having 800,000 or those are, we haven't seen those in a long time.
Sheet that we have, where does it say about that, the lack of, yeah, the 0.49 is an interest revenue reduction. So that's been added into these numbers or no?
Yeah, so if you'll just, there is little, about middle of the page, there's interest earned. Yeah, so that's separate from the 179,000. That 179,000 goes into general revenue. The interest here of $445,000, Daryl, if you'll just advance, just go up a little bit. Oh, no. Yeah, either way, whatever. Oh. So can you just get me there it is. So see the interest earned of 445? So $445,000 of the interest earned by the city of Cranbrook is transferred right into reserves. And the residual, I think we're at, is it 900? Is it 900 and some this year, Charlene, total budget for interest?
Yeah, so the.
Yeah, so it's a $900,000 total for interest earned by the city, and I hope I don't stumble on this, but so of that $900,000, 445,000 of it is going into reserves. The rest of it stays in the general account, and as Councillor Graham was referring to, supplements our operating income. And the 176 represents the drop that is supplementing our operating income in 2025 over what we had available in 2024. Okay. I'm not sure if there are any others. The facilities reserve. So, yeah, I'm just going to let Charlene carry on now.
Okay, so to just go down the list. So so from grants, we're putting 1,151,000 into the reserves, and most of that is going into the gas tax reserve. Then we have retirement of debt, a little bit, that's just a drop of interest. That's going into the reserve. Then under other, we have,
Can I just? Sorry, Charlene.
that's okay.
So this is where you're seeing what we talked about earlier, the debt retirement in 2026. In 2025, it's minor, but in 2026, there's that $271,000 that's going in, and then in 2027, it becomes 394, and then so that's showing that's on that other schedule we saw. That's where this is going, is in here. So when we get to the facilities reserve in detail, you'll see that whether it's coming from here or a new tax levy, unless we sell off some city facilities or something, that money isn't needed to do the work that is in the current 5-year financial plan. And I might just remind council that one of the big outstanding items in our asset management is a facilities assessment. So that we do not have as good a picture around facilities as we have around roads, water, sewer, probably parks. Caitlin has just finished the assessment out at the spray irrigation. So facilities is the last big piece of our asset management plan, and we don't yet have all that information.
Okay, so then under the other category is the big payment is our mortgage payment, 1,033,000. And then we have the interest earned that we've talked about. So that's it for the general fund. So for the general fund, we have 9.1 million going into the reserves. The water fund, we have 2.1 going into the reserves, and most of that is from frontage tax to fund our capital program, our water capital.
So this is in 2026, we are going to be at the $1 million mark. There are other things we targeted $1 million to be going into the water fund and the sewer fund. 5 years ago, we said we're going to move from 500,000 to $1 million. We're going to increase at $100,000 a year. And that final increase is happening in 2026. And I think as you've heard Director Matika talk about, that $1 million target really after the inflationary situation is now a $2 million target. So there we will at some point be coming back and having discussions about that.
Okay, so in the sewer fund, 2.8 million and 1.4, almost 1.5 is frontage tax. And then we have desledging, which is also funded from frontage tax. So that the desledging is 644,167. That goes into the desledging part of the sewer capital fund reserve. And then we have the solid waste fund reserve, and we have 128,439 going into that reserve. So that gives us total contributions going to the reserves of 14,201,000. Any questions on that?
I just wanted,
Charlotte
sorry.
has.
Councillor Ray?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, I heard Councillor Blissett mention that it does appear that there's $200,000 in the water fund, for example, and that's true, but that relies on this net operating transfer to reserve of $477,000. And you can see that that starts to, that's a little bit all over the place, because what that is, it's the surplus from the operations that gets transferred into the reserve. So as costs regulate in the water fund on the operations side, less is transferred through to the reserve. And I believe in the water fund, we have an increase in the frontage tax that's a little bit ahead of some of the borrowing we're going to be
The
doing.
Gold Creek borrowing. too.
Yeah, so that's why there's a pretty significant deposit in 2025, because that increase in the frontage tax was a little bit ahead of that borrowing. So that is not intended to keep happening.
Because originally we had that borrowing for 2024 for Gold Creek Dam. That obviously didn't happen, so. So any more questions on?
Thank
Councillor
you,
Ray?
Mayor. Thank you. Two quick questions. So you mentioned the facilities assessment. So is that underway, and what's the timeline for that project?
Councillor Ray, through the mayor, I'm not sure. I don't know, but let me try and let me talk to the group, the Asset Management Steering Committee, and we could maybe make arrangements to bring back some kind of an update for council.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
you bet.
And then my other question, we've talked a couple times during our budget meetings to date about opportunities to decrease expenses, but also opportunities to increase revenue. So when we look at our interest earned, just maybe in brief, how do we earn that interest? Do we have a policy on how we approach our finances to earn that interest? And are there any opportunities that are reasonably conservative but that could potentially increase that revenue?
Councillor Ray. So we do have a draft investment policy that we're working on. Currently, we're pretty limited on what we can invest in. We have about $4 million invested in higher interest products like GICs and a high interest savings account. But basically that's what we're in. And cash flow wise, we are, as you can see, we're planning on spending the money just as fast as we get it into our reserves. So it's difficult to go more long term. So we are pretty short term and keeping everything pretty liquid.
Just one quick follow-up. What's the timeline, do you think, to bring that draft investment policy to council?
Councillor Ray, through the mayor, our hope is in 2025. We have a number of policies that we'd like to wrap up in 2025. We've been a little occupied with the payroll project. So thank you.
Okay, so if there's no more questions about the contributions, we'll go to the reserve withdrawals, and that's page 37 of your package. So, in the general fund, we have the capital works reserve withdrawal for the road program of 3.6. And then other projects that are related to the infrastructure. So that gives you 3.9, that's coming out of the capital works reserve. 125,000 out of the information technology reserve. 52.5 out of the downtown parking. And so some of the other major ones is the facilities reserve, 1.1 million. 1 million coming out of the community works gas tax, for a total coming out of the general fund of 7.6 million. Sorry.
That's okay. I was signaling and I just wanted to point out that in 2029, we're looking at over $10 million funded from reserves.
For the water fund, we have 2.3 coming out of the water capital reserve. Coming out of the sewer capital reserve, 3.8 million, and the solid waste is 699. So that's the total transfers from reserves of 14,502,000.
So council can see that in the utility funds, the drawdown, with the exception, of course, of solid waste, but so in water and sewer, it's pretty steady in terms of what comes out of those reserves.
Yeah, so if we want to go to the next page, which is the graph, it highlights that what's going in and what's going out is about even. That's what Charlotte just said. Yeah.
Councillor Stetsky?
So back in the reserve fund balances, it showed 26 million for 2025. This shows 14 million coming out of it, and wouldn't that leave a balance of 12 million?
I'm sorry, I didn't follow the math, but did you count the going in?
If you go to reserve fund balances that we looked at earlier on, it said the total ending balance for 2025 was $26,024,332. And now we're taking 14 million out. So doesn't that say there's a $12 million balance?
So of course, there are opening balances as
opening, yeah,
well.
we don't have-
There are opening balances sorry, Charlene, in 2024. And then so there are closing balances in 2024, which become opening balances in 2025. Then to those opening balances, you would add the transfers in 2025 and subtract the transfers out. And that would then give you the closing balance in 2026 of 27 million. I'm not sure if I'm following the question.
So 7.3.1 was reserve fund balances. And for 2025, the total existing balance is 26 million and change. Going back to reserve fund balance is 7.3.1. And if we're withdrawing 14 million,
So the 14 is the amount going in, is that right?
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, so
yeah, if you look at that column for 2025, it's showing a balance of 24 million.
26 million, this one here?
It's up on the screen.
Yeah, 20.
Yeah, 26 million.
That's the end of it.
Yeah, that's the end of 2025, the budgeted balance for the end of 2025.
I'm just trying to
And the
figure out
four-
why if we're only taking 14 million out and the balance is 24 million, doesn't that show that there should still be money left? Just trying to figure out the math.
So maybe because we don't have the 2024 balances, so if you take the 2025 balance of 26 million and you add to that the contributions of 14 million in 2025, reduce that by the withdrawals of 14 million, and that should bring you back to about the 27 million in 2026. So there's a little bit more coming out than going in. I don't have my calculator here. 26 million plus 14 million minus four, sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm pretty sure the math works, but what,
It was about done.
What was the?
So you can see your contributions to
Yeah.
reserves, 14.
yeah,
Transfers from reserves is 14.
Yeah.
So that is back just about to nothing. And it's still the numbers will be.
yeah, so that's what I'm, but it's, there's just so there is a $1 million difference.
Or is it one over? Because then you have to look at what's going in for 2020.
Yeah, so but
Right.
if you take the 2025
This is
ending
what-
balance, 26 million.
26, add the 2020.
You know what? We're going to take a quick break here while you guys are sorting that out, I think, because I think a few people needed to hit the
Sorry, the 14.
boys' rooms and the girls' rooms here. And yeah, probably a good time to break. We're good to go? Okay, well, welcome back, guys. Everybody had a little break here. Charlotte, you're good to go.
I am, sir.
I think you're in the middle of answering a question when we broke there.
Yeah, so that looks very interesting. We'll take a look at that and get back to you. Yeah, it has to do with the airport. The airport, the two reserves at the airport are included in the balances, but they're not included in the ins and outs. So we'll rework those working papers for council and send it out to you via email, if everyone is all right with that. We apologize for that confusion.
Thank you. And then we got, I believe we had Councillor Graham, Councillor Ray with questions? No, nobody else? Oh, wow. Okay, moving right along then.
Okay, so rather than go through this big batch of detailed information around the reserves, if council has any questions about that information, we'd be happy to answer it. We have highlighted some of the areas that we thought might be of interest to council, such as the retired debt going into the reserves, the land sales reserve being reliant on the mortgage payments. We've talked about the interest that's going into the reserves. So if there aren't any questions on this big batch of information, we'll.
Councillor Popoff, Councillor
Thank you.
Teske, and then I got a quick
I'm
one.
looking at the Capital Works Reserve.
Okay.
I know it's into next election cycle, but it looks like we want to be installing and building more traffic lights. In particular on Baker and 14th Avenue, where the high school is. Ridgeview Road, where Rick's Fine Meats are. These are into the next election cycle, but you know, we're almost $2 million for these things. And I think it's our role to look at the analysis of why these are important for traffic and traffic flow and safety, and also the cost to do this. Kimberly boasts one traffic light, and I think we're more than two in Cranbrook.
Yeah.
So I'd like to go forward and see that rationale going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Popoff. I think that's a fair question, you know, and then let's be honest, you know, budgets, you're looking at going into election year. I'm looking at stuff at 2026 as well. And you know, is that a game changer in the community? You know, I know they're trying to get out in front of things, you know, because we've always been playing catch up. But, you know, just looking at what 2026 looks like, we're looking wherever we can save cost right now going forward. So that's a good idea. And Charlotte, I'll just mention, I was going to ask you just if you can just flag this, and I'll talk to you about it later, is the facilities reserve on the withdrawals. We're going from 1,100 to just about 1,900. Don't worry about it. I'll come and talk to you this week, but remind me, we'll have a conversation, and I just want to see into 2026 if there's anywhere we can't. Okay, and then we got Councillor Teske. Yep. Mark.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go back to,
Can I,
oh, sure.
Yep.
can I just respond to Councillor Popoff? So I think what you were talking about, Councillor Popoff, was the development cost charges. I flipped through here, the road development cost charges. Is that where you were getting the signalization?
Capital Works Reserve?
Okay, because,
I don't see any
yeah, so what I,
stabilization.
you were talking about the Ridgeview Road signalization, the,
Baker Street and 14th Avenue signalization
Yeah.
and Ridgeview Road signalization.
so I think some of those are tied to DCCs, and until we change the DCC bylaw, then we can remove some of those things. I think is sort of what's going on with some things that they'll come, those changes come when we do the DCC bylaw changes, because we have to have them in the DCC bylaw in order to tax for them, but until we update the DCC bylaw, that's in the DCC bylaw. I think that might be the response to some of those.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Stetsky?
Yeah, thank you. Charlotte, you know, we have a lot of faith in you too. And I know Councillor Ray has asked for color coding, but off the top of your head, just to save a little bit of time, at least from my perspective, which reserves are you concerned about for 2025 and which ones for 2026? If any of them?
For 2025, we're pretty good, but as we move on throughout the years, like the facilities reserve, the fleet and heavy equipment, the equipment furniture reserve, all those reserves, we need more consistent funding into those reserves to support all the capital projects that are coming out of those reserves. I think as we get a more detailed asset management plan, it will really highlight where we need to go, and so we can be more strategic with our reserves. Do you want to add anything?
No, I think that covers it. You know, Charlene does work her magic to balance everything out. And year one is always, you know, the heaviest year one being 2025. So we manage that. And as we start to see big stuff looming, you know, we start, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? You know, the big bulks, replacements or recapitalization that we talked about earlier, where all of a sudden you're cruising along and you're spending $15 million in capital, and all of a sudden you have a $30 million year. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but what are you going to do then? And that, you know, a 5-year time horizon is just way too short to be able to react to that. So I would say the reserves that Charlene has identified are those are exactly the same ones I would identify. And the capital reserve, the capital works reserve, is pretty well funded. So right now I don't have any concerns about that, but that reserve funds our road program. So Mike works it with you know, here's the money you have to spend. So he plans his road program around that. It's not like I have, you know, future huge road programs sitting out there that do not equal the amount that's coming into the road program. So that one, for the time being, is reasonable. The ones Charlene identified they're smaller. The items that go through them are smaller. They're frequent. So those ones I would agree are a concern.
I think the major concern, certainly for myself, is once we complete the actual asset management plan, what needs to happen to make sure we're doing the right thing. That one certainly gives me some concern thinking ahead.
Councillor Stetsky, that's absolutely correct. And I just might remind everyone that you'll never be done with your asset management plan. It is a moving, evolving child that we will be forever responsible for. And, you know, and how we manage it, how we fund it is, as I've said earlier, you know, it is, it will be a balancing act between reserves, grants, borrowing, considerations around who should pay, all of those things. So it would be great if there was a matrix and we just, yep, we're done. And we're going to make some great decisions and we're going to make some not so great decisions.
Stuart Virtual?
If I could, Mayor Price, just through to Councillor Stetsky, and you know what you just raised is the excellent point about asset management. It's doing the right thing to the asset at the right time. And that's where budgeting appropriately to show true costs is important. Because when we try to budget for a tax increase that doesn't reflect the true cost of operations, what typically happens then is the actual cost of maintenance is something that is not shown and then it's not done. And so when assets aren't maintained, the repairs take place on overtime with parts shipped in at a high cost for whatever price you pay versus scheduled maintenance that has a shutdown. It's planned. The parts are bought at the cheapest prices. And so that's critical. And that's where these two things link, from the tax increase and the cost of operations back to our assets. So thanks for that.
Just in addition to Charlene's and my earlier previous comments about which reserves, the financial stabilization reserve is also not in great shape. It is, it has a balance pretty consistently at the end of each of those years of about $600,000. The minimum balance per our policy is $900,000 and the optimum is 1.8 million. And that's based on 5% of operating revenue. So we have been pretty liberal with use of this reserve, and it is reflected in the low balance in there. So we do have some concerns about that. This particular reserve is the one that we would use to smooth out, let's say we see a huge drop in building revenue or building permits. Yeah, sorry, building permits. We could in theory top up the $176,000 in lost interest revenue from the financial stabilization reserve. So it's taken a beating, would be my comment.
Councillor Peabody, then Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Just looking at the solid waste capital reserve. Looks like over the next 5 years, we have, a lot coming out of it, but nothing going in. Is that just a reserve or not contributing to anymore?
The solid waste capital reserve is the reserve. It's net operating surplus that goes into the reserve. We don't fund that reserve for any additional capital. That's something that we should look at doing, but.
Yeah, thank you, Charlene. What I would add to that is, we've made this switch to mechanical garbage trucks, and now we're looking at recycling. And in the old days, because we don't have frontage taxes, or we do have some user fees, but we don't have frontage taxes that would fund capital in the utility, in that particular utility. And in the old days, what we did was we would buy a garbage truck, and did we borrow for that, Charlene? Did we do 5-year? Did we do that?
For this.
For garbage, no, in the old days for garbage trucks. We replaced garbage trucks every 7 years. We probably were able to pay them cash because I think they were like under $300,000 in those days. So that was all we needed to buy in the solid waste fund. So we had enough, the fees we were collecting were enough to fund the garbage trucks. But now that the whole model has changed, we will need to go in and take a look and see, what, how to be more strategic around this reserve. And if council remembers, on Monday, I think it was, and even just today, we increased the collection fees and the landfill fees. So the landfill fee is as a direct result of the requisition from the RDEK, and the collections is to fund garbage collections, operations. So we do need to take a look at how to fund future assets now that the program has evolved.
Yeah, and just to add to what Charlotte's saying, I would say that we have debt retirement for the garbage trucks that we're currently paying for. They retire in 2029, so I would say in 2030, we should be putting that towards buying the new garbage trucks. So putting that into the reserve and using that to fund the new garbage trucks.
Councillor Graham, Councillor Teske.
How long have we had the financial stabilization reserve? I just trying to remember when that came in.
The same time that we did the policy, so just before CAO Furcho arrived.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stetsky.
And just quickly, 7.314 new initiatives reserve. just transfer out of reserves and then there's a number in each of the years, but it doesn't say where that goes. I don't know, in my thing, it's Jeff 7.314, new initiatives reserve. Might be easier to pull it up that way. I guess it's page number 1, it says, yeah.
Yeah.
A million.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've got it up on the screen.
So are you looking at the transfers out of the reserves?
Well, new initiatives reserve, it's on the
Yes.
screen. We've got transfers out, and there's a number there, but it doesn't say why we're transferring.
Yeah,
money out.
those transfers out of that reserve is to fund the energy manager or the environment. I'm not sure what
Yeah,
his title
exactly.
is, but that's
That
what.
position is.
So we're funding 50% of his wages out of the new initiatives reserve. This is where the climate action, the local government climate action grant goes into. And we're funding 50% of his salary out of those funds.
So it's grant based?
Yeah, so that $170,000, $152,000 of that is the climate action grant that we receive. And then plus a little bit of interest, right? Is it? No. Anyway, we contribute $20,000 from taxes. There's a $20,000 from taxes contribution for the total of $170,000. So I'm sorry, I was wrong. The grant is $150,000. And then we fund 50% of what was the energy manager position. It has a new title now. We fund 50% of that out of this reserve. So that's what the transfer out is. It goes into our operating fund.
Councillor Bissett.
Well, thank you. Back to the previous overhead with the garbage, with the recycling, but we haven't agreed to any of this. So this is just speculative, possible. I mean, if we don't agree to it, then we're still at $1 million. So I'm just saying, that's how I'm interpreting this at this point.
Councillor Bissett, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're trying to look out 5 years. So yeah. Based on information we have now and where this might go. Are there any other questions on the detailed information from the reserves? And please, council, if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them, at a later meeting. So this is not your only kick at the can. You can take a look at it and think about it. And I'm also, of course, available to answer questions at any time. So DCCs are, just a quick blurb on DCCs.
Yeah.
So they start on page, like you guys aren't using page numbers. So just a blurb on DCCs. You'll see that some of them are in a negative position. Yeah, there you go. And, we're trying to manage this to see what happens, because what's driving these numbers is what's in the 5-year financial plan, because those projects have to be in the 5-year financial plan in order to be in the bylaw. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. And these things will only happen if, growth requires it, or we decide to move on a project that is eligible for DCCs. Now, should that happen, and let's say, in terms of water. Yes. So the UV disinfection. So we have grant money for that. That's a DCC project. But we don't have enough DCCs to cover the DCC portion of that. So we would borrow for the DCC portion and recover that over time. And we have examples of that. Historically, I think up at Mount Royal, there was some of that. Yeah, the west side sewer. I think over on the West Hill. Anyway, so there are examples of us having borrowed to cover the DCC costs, and then, collecting the DCCs from going forward until that debt is paid.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I just closed my screen here. Where do I see, like on all the other reserves, like we see transfers in. Where do we see the transfers in for DCCs? Or like, where do we see, like, it would be nice to see like, the money's collected, say like in 22, 23, 24, like how much money we bring in these DCCs, because realistically, we're not bringing in much because there's no development, and we're costing projects that are well beyond what we'll ever see in a DCC project. So I think with that would lead us into some very robust conversation around this DCCs when it comes to the bylaw update, which I think we're talking about in the next few months. So yeah, like I don't see any transfers in,
So
probably
if-
because there isn't much.
Yeah, so we're, for instance, for the road, DCC road, if you go to the DCC schedule for road, which is, I don't know what page it is on your package, but you can see we're estimating 200,000. So it's just a shot in the dark, basically. So, and same with the storm, we're estimating 20,000. Going in, parks, 25,000.
You guys do these?
Water, 200,000, and sewer, 80,000. And that's based on previous years.
Yeah, I just think maybe because these ones are so development contingent comparative to some of the other ones, it would be interesting to see the trends, because that would help us set projects and look at, well, what's realistic? Because yeah, you look at that, well, we're overdrawn in the account by 6 million. Well, clearly DCCs aren't going to pay for it. So like we be eyes wide open as we're looking at these projects.
Councillor Graham, through the Mayor Price, I think that's an excellent suggestion. And I will bring something back. We'll bring a schedule back in January. And I think that there's some, there would be some value in us maybe, making that type of a schedule a regular part of our presentation. And in particular, bring it forward again as the bylaw rewrite comes forward. So we'll develop something, and if we didn't quite get it right, please let us know and we'll tweak that. So the final part of all of this is the accumulated surplus. So this is on page 93. So I'll just speak while Daryl looks for that. So like the reserves, the surplus has a target, and it is usually based on some variable of monthly operating expenses. So in the general fund, the current minimum and optimums are 3 million and 6 million. Currently, the general fund surplus is sitting at 2.9, so very close to the minimum. Mayor Price?
So Charlotte, yeah, so we're well beyond our optimums in a couple of those funds. Can we legally transfer from the water fund into the general fund or from the sewer fund in? Can we waterfall those funds or no?
Mayor Price through Mayor Price. So down below in the left-hand corner, based on an analysis of the projections in the 25-29 financial plan, by 2029, the following adjustments to the minimum and the optimum would be required in these surpluses. So I believe some of them are still in excess. I know Charlene has moved some funds this year out of the surplus. 500,000 out of the water into the water capital fund. So there's been a little bit of that done, so the minimum and optimums that are up on the top of the page are the ones that we're sort of working with right now.
Yep.
And this has been a sheet that council has seen each year. So we just keep, letting council know so that, for example, in the general fund, by the end of 2029, the minimum is going to be 3.9.
Yep.
Yeah, so it does look like there's some, we can move a little bit of it.
Yep.
I'll talk, Charlene and I will take a look at that. Yeah.
Councillor Graham?
Yeah, thank you. I think just for clarity, what are we required by statute to have? And that is not the surplus, it is the capital fund. Like, we are required by statute to have water, sewer, and have money in it, correct, from the province?
Councillor Graham, I'm not aware of any such statutory requirement. Charlene's not aware of it either.
Okay.
If you have a reference to something, please forward it. So I just want to, cash flow is, we're getting to a stage where we have periods of the year where we have to manage our cash flow carefully. This buffer, this reserve, this surplus is intended to do that. I know we have the borrowing bylaw in place so that we could access a line of credit if we wanted to, but we haven't used that. But I would say in 2024, we've come as close as I've ever seen it to having to use that, and that is with these surplus funds. So I'd be they are also emergency funds, true emergency funds, but I would not recommend touching it for anything other than a real emergency. Okay. Are there any questions on the, okay. So I think we'll move through the utility rates fairly quickly. The next page, page 95 for Daryl's purposes, is a summary of the user fees showing the 2024 rates and then the projected rates for 25 through 29. 25 is pretty much locked in. We are going to be coming back to council in the new year with parcel tax, frontage tax bylaws to adjust the increase, to adjust the rates. Currently, we're at $11 and $10 for water and sewer respectively. And the budget calls for increases in both of those to 13 and 12 water sewer respectively. So the frontage taxes end up on your tax bill, just like property taxes. Whereas the user fees are the fees that your bill are your monthly billing amounts. And then the parcel tax is shown as a cost per taxable meter. So in 2025, 13 for water, 12 for sewer. And the calculation down below that shows the total water frontage tax and sewer frontage tax based on a lot, the average lot of being 15.25 meters. And so that's the average that residents would be paying. So at the very, very bottom, we talk about a total user fee and parcel taxes. Now, they're not billed together. As I said, one is billed monthly or every 4 months, and the other one is billed on your utility notice or tax notice. And so the change in 2025 over 2024 is $79. Are there any questions? Okay. So the following, I think, 3 pages basically details the revenue in each of the utility funds. It talks a little bit about investment income in the water. There's some temporary water lines. There are penalties. This is a direct result of what council has adopted today, which is a deferral of penalties at December 31st. So each billing period, we charge a 2% penalty if you're on the outstanding balance. So that is at the end of April and end of August, end of December. But for December 2024, council has deferred that to January 15th. Are there any questions about the revenue in the utility fees? Okay, or funds, pardon me.
You're on a roll.
I'm on a roll. Watch me roll. Okay, conventional transit. Page 103. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I think we've talked a lot about that. The increase is $153,000. And if council is interested, I could bring back a bit of an admin update on some of the line items in, no? Okay.
We can change something.
No, I think the place to pay attention is as we move through the service review with BC Transit. And there's going to probably be there'll be opportunity, but yeah, okay.
Councillor Ray, then Councillor Stetsky.
Thank you. Just wondering if we have a sense of the timeline, and this might be more for the CAO, a sense of the timeline for that transit feedback process and review that's underway?
Mayor Price through to Councillor Ray, I think the end of this week, the public consultation period
I think
closes.
so.
Yeah, so then they'll be wrapping that up and probably, it'll be well into the new year. I don't have the exact date. We've been trying to really log that public consultation portion. So, and I think that ends today.
Thank you.
Councillor Stetsky.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So in looking provincially, the split we have between the province and local taxpayers, is that standard around the province? And like, if you live in Vancouver, it's kind of the same percentage or? Yeah. But otherwise, we're all paying, so we need a provincial increase around the province to get more out of them.
So the next item is my memo on the municipal grants. This is just a FYI. There's a schedule attached as well, showing who has applied, how much we have available, and we are essentially $100,000 oversubscribed. The intent is to get council the packages, and that's assuming nothing happens with the budget. The intent is to provide council with the packages at the beginning of January, and then at the January for your review of the applications. And then on January 29th, we would meet as we've done in the past, which typically would have happened in September, but we'll meet with council on the 29th and go over the collective results of your assessments and determine award amounts for 2025. Yeah, are there any questions?
Councillor Ray.
Thank you. So this question kind of leads into our next item as well. So I had some feedback from the community, just saying that it's a bit confusing to have some of the items that come under municipal grants versus some of the items that come under contributions to others or fees for service. It's just confusing for folks because some of it seems similar, like the large grant to Key City Theatre. How is that different from the large grant to the Cranbrook History Center? So I just wanted to share that feedback for folks who are external to the organization. It seems like they're apples and apples, but they're in two different baskets. And why is that? And would it make more sense to restructure things somehow and put everything in one basket? So I think it would feel to folks as a more transparent and equitable process. So I just wanted to share that there's questions about why is it the way it is? Why are some things under contributions to others, fees for service grants to organizations, whereas other things which look quite similar are under the annual municipal grants?
Councillor Ray through Mayor Price. So a number of those agencies you've identified have service agreements with the city. That's the History Center. So that is under, and I believe in the next couple of slides, we've talked about contributions to others, fees for service, and grants to organizations. So that's separate. The curling rink is separate. Cranbrook Tourism, those are all fees for service agreements. We can certainly create I'm not sure if it actually shows up like that. Yeah, it does. Grants to organizations are under, yeah, so fair enough. Perhaps some tweaking to do on the formatting of the slide. We have removed the library. We have said the library is not a grant. The library is a municipal library, and there is legislation requiring the city of Cranbrook to fund the library. So it is not a grant. So we've taken the first step this year to remove them from this, I'm not sure if it's enough, but they are not a grant. The Key City Theatre. So Key City Theatre and there's a couple of others. The reason they're presented in grants, even though the Key City Theater is different because we have an agreement with School District Number 5, that is a very large contribution, and that is part of the grants budget. So if council wishes to either reduce the grants budget and separate Key City Theater and say, call it something else, the bottom line is it's being paid for out of that bucket. So so from our perspective, which may not be everyone's perspective, I appreciate that, they're funded from the same pocket or from the same bucket. So we'll take a look at that and see if we can maybe tweak that a little bit. But it does get, from our perspective, we need to say we have $275,000 available for grants. 125 of it is already committed. So the uncommitted portion that's left to deal with the grants program is this much. And I don't know if there's some value in posting that this is the city's grant budget and these are existing commitments. This is what's left. Here's the pocket you're applying under. I don't know if there's some value to putting something like that on our website. I've never seen any other municipality do that because these grants are also at council's discretion. So if council decides to exceed the cap, that is completely at council's discretion. So, but noted, we have heard that certainly from the library. So we'll try to do better.
Thanks, Charlotte.
All right, the final, final is this contributions to others, fees for service, grants to organizations. I have two comments here. The Cranbrook History Center appeared as a delegation. They have an ask for an increase. They will be, we'll find some way to present that to council in January, probably in the form of you've seen like the new asks that we've done. We'll write it up, we'll get a resolution, and then council can vote on that. And the Cranbrook Public Library. So the budget here assumes the continuation of a 2% increase. That is not what the library would like to see. So in January, they will be coming as a delegation with information for council's consideration. What I will highlight for council is that under their current lease agreement, they are triple net lease, they have to pay for their own insurance, their own, et cetera, et cetera. They pay for that out of the grant money the funding we provide them. And of course, there's the RDEK is part of this calculation as well. So since 2019, I don't have the breakdown for the library itself, but for that building over there, the insurance has increased 100%. So, and that's not all the libraries, but let's say it's a linear increase. So the library, if the building's increased 100%, the library's increased 100%. That's very difficult for them to make up in a 2% annual increase, even though 2% is 2% of what they receive, whereas 100% of the insurance is a much smaller number, right? The other thing that council needs to be aware of is that their wage contracts, and I don't know what the source of I don't know where the start of this was, but the contracts they have with their employees provide the same increases to those employees as our CUPE staff receives. So if our CUPE staff receives a 2% increase, so does the library staff. Now, CUPE has been receiving increases in excess of the 2% that we've been providing the library. Again, 2% is just of the wage cost, not the whole thing. So they are facing some challenges just meeting those costs. So expect to hear that from the library in January. And that's it. That's all I had.
Fantastic.
You're able to book
Yeah,
again?
about January? Yeah. Sorry. Okay, not bad. We will see you next in January. And at that point, we will be bringing back information on the initiatives that were rolled out in the public survey. And around some facility hour changes, some changes to level of services and what that actually would mean. So that information is scheduled to come back to you on January 15th, plus some ancillary things that have come up here. As I said, the library will be coming forward. We will be presenting something on the History Center. So, and it's entirely, I wouldn't be surprised if new things come up as well. So before we leave, I would like to know, and as a matter of fact, you don't actually have to tell me this right now, but I think you can send something through to us. If you have anything that you would like us to look at that was not part of what we put out to the public, please send it through to CAO Furcho, and we will take a look at that. So I would like to, first of all, I would like to thank Charlene and Melissa Willman and Melissa Wilhelm, who have been key players in this, and I couldn't have done it without them. And then I would like to thank CAO Furcho, and I'd like to thank council. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions. Councillor Graham, a comment or question?
Yeah, I think we have to be cognizant as well when it comes to the library, that core funding to the libraries from the province hasn't increased since 2009. So, they could come back to us for all these things, but we don't have the money either.
Fair. Anybody else? Well, Charlotte, another year, great job. Again, I said it the other day, I think the process was great. I think the way it was delivered and the way council understood it is as good as I've seen. So thank you to you and your team. Mark, thank you. And can you please pass our thanks along to all the department heads? I know they had to dive back into these several times, to try and get us down to where it would be somewhat reasonable. But yes, Charlotte.
I'm sorry, Marnie, I left you out. Thank you to you as well, very, very much. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you, council. This was, this is tough, but I'm really, really happy with the professionalism and I don't think there's too many rocks left unturned. I really believe that, no matter where we come in this year, I know for a fact, finance and staff have turned over a rock. And I think anybody that watched the sessions with council, I don't think there's any rocks that haven't been, overturned and had a look. So going forward, all we can do is the best we can do, and hopefully we come out with a desirable income and outcome, I guess. Yeah. So on that, it's probably our last meeting before Christmas. Merry Christmas to the staff, but more importantly, we'll see staff probably before the break. To the public, have a good Christmas and a happy New Year and a safe travels for anybody that's traveling over the holiday season. I'll go around the table if anybody's got anything to say. Councillor Stetsky.
Yeah, just quickly, I was ringing the bells for Sally Ann again yesterday, and I ran into a person that works for BC Ambulance, and it is true, they have cut from 4 to 3 cars in Cranbrook. There's still 2 in Kimberley. They do try and help each other out, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. And they were doing that because the ambulance service said they're run out of money, basically.
So it has been reduced?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so Mark, if you can make a note, maybe we'll look into that next week when we're back and see what we can do with the province. Mike, nothing on that? Ron? No? Okay, so that's a wrap. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Peabody, Councillor Ray, all in favor? Adjourn. Thank you so much, guys.